Welcome to the Accounting Success Podcast. Ian Wellham is a chartered accountant, helping other CPA firms maximize their profit potential and become the most relevant advisor to clients. To learn how you can add value, introduce new revenue streams, and move into high-value advisory services, simply go to www.haydenrock.com. On the podcast, Ian brings together successful accountants and industry thought leaders to share with you how they serve business owners and how you can too. And now, here is your host, Ian Wellham.
Hello and welcome to the Accounting Success Podcast. I'm pleased to have on the call today Alan Long, Managing Partner at Baldwin CPAs, a top regional firm based in Kentucky. Alan has been a CPA for more than 34 years. He served as a president of the Kentucky Society of CPAs, a member of the Tech Task Force and Peer Review Board for the AICPA, and on the State Board of Accountancy also. If that's not enough, a few years ago he was one of only 10 CPAs across the country awarded Managing Partner Elite status by Accounting Today. The list recognizes outstanding leaders who are tackling big issues and making a difference in the accounting industry. That's a pretty big deal. So let me say congratulations, Alan, and welcome to the Accounting Success Podcast.
Thank you.
That's great to have you on, Alan. You said your firm has been recognized, I see your firm has been recognized as future focused for a number of different initiatives. Since that's the exact focus of our podcast, I've got lots of things I'd like to ask you up front, but before we get our feet wet, perhaps you could give me and the listeners a 2-minute background about yourself and also about your firm.
Sure. I'm as you said earlier, I'm a CPA, have been for 34, 35 years or more. I can't remember now. I started my own practice. I started with a regional firm. Let me back up just a little bit. I started with a regional firm before I ever got out of college, and I interned with that firm for a year, and then I became a full-time employee. Stayed at that firm for about 5 years, left and went to a sole practitioner firm. That did not work out real well for me because we sort of had a different philosophy on how to practice public accounting, so I decided to start my own firm in 1984. At that time, I started my own firm, and luckily in 1985, I was able to purchase the oldest practice in my hometown of Richmond, Kentucky. And then since that point in time, we have done nothing but try to move the firm forward and to help with the profession as we grow our firm.
That's very interesting. And you were quite a young guy starting your own firm then?
Yes, I was 26, 27 years old.
And what was it that kind of gave you the inspiration or the feeling that you could make it work?
I've always been entrepreneurial. And even when I went into this profession and looked at this major in college, the one thing I liked is I would be able to own and run a business. The business would just be in the accounting profession. So starting my own firm seemed a natural thing for me. I wanted to be able to grow and control my own destiny. And by starting my own firm, I was able to do that. I didn't have a boss other than me. I had to be accountable to myself.
Yeah, now that's really interesting because many CPAs almost don't consider themselves to be business owners. They talk about their professional practice, but they don't work on it like a business. Seems that you're different.
I think I am different, and I think a lot of firms, the successful firms, are treating their practices like businesses. That doesn't mean we can't be a professional just because we treat it like a business, but it's no different than any other business where you're a McDonald's franchisee or where you're a contractor or anything else. We have to treat our firms as a business and make appropriate business decisions. And at the same time, we can still be professionals also.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, and I'm glad you make it. Now, I mentioned earlier that having been an accountant for 34 years, when people hear that, they probably got some kind of stereotype picture in their mind of a stodgy old accountant, perhaps an antique adding machine or two. But I want to quickly eradicate that image for our listeners because, in fact, you're the polar opposite of that. For example, I believe you own a Harley. Is that right?
Yes, I do. I've ridden a Harley for years. Don't ride it as much anymore, but I do still have the bike, and I still do ride occasionally. At one time, I rode 15 to 18,000 miles a year. And probably the greatest thing that anyone, when I would meet folks, even when I was younger, when I would meet folks and they would ask me what I did for a living, and I told them I was a CPA, and they said I would have never guessed that. So that I always enjoyed.
Well, I would say it's not a typical pursuit for a CPA. Have you got any other unique pastimes you'd like to share with us?
Yes, of course, I like to hunt and fish. Several years ago, I actually did some photography, and my wife and I did photography, and we did a lot of weddings, and then it became sort of like work, so we quit because it was a passion we had, but we didn't want it to feel like work. I still do some photography just for my own personal reasons, and then at one time I actually shot pistols competitively. I did that for several years, and was at one time I was in the top 20 in my class in the nation. So, I've had a lot of different varied pursuits that a lot of times you wouldn't think of for a person that's in the CPA profession.
That's really interesting. And if we talk now maybe about your firm, how many offices are you up to now?
Well, we've got 4 offices right now, and we'll be adding a 5th office as of November 1st. We just recently signed a letter of intent to add a 5th office in Lexington, Kentucky, effective November 1st.
Wow. And how many partners and employees do you have?
There are 10 partners, and counting the partners, we've got about 55 employees, and that just sort of depends on what day of the week it possibly is, because in this profession, we do have some turnover, and we hire a lot of interns also, and so they sort of come and go throughout the year, so I can't give you an exact number on employees.
No, that's fine. Now, I understand that you do a lot of work in the construction industry. How did that come around?
It came around because I met a bonding agent that he and I hit it off really well, and me not being as you said earlier, the typical CPA, fit in that typical CPA mold, he liked that because his construction company clients like that too. I didn't show up in the suit and tie necessarily all the time, and they liked the fact that I could talk to them about their bulldozers or their backhoes or their nail guns, whatever it was, because most of that stuff, having grown up in a rural environment, I have done a whole lot of that. Actually, one of my clients I've actually drove a dump truck for just for the fun on the weekends, occasionally when he would need a driver. So he was a close personal friend of mine, and he was a client also, but I enjoyed going out and driving a dump truck. It was something different to do. I didn't have to sit in the office.
Wow. And do you have any other industries that the firm tends to specialize in?
Yes, we've got a heavy not-for-profit practice. Also, we are in the governmental arena, and we do a lot of peer reviews for other CPA firms.
Ah, I see. Well, going back to the time when I first started as a chartered accountant in the UK, it was customary for the rookies to do a lot of auditing. I was I had an assignment, what you might describe as counting cornflakes at one point for Kellogg's.
Yes.
Now that was my indoctrination to accounting. Maybe not so ideal, but do you have any early welcome to the world of accounting stories that you'd like to share with us?
Well, yes, I've had a couple of accounting stories. Like you said, you talked about those counting cornflakes. One job that I was on early on in my career was doing inventory observations for a string of retail stores in eastern Kentucky, and it was a June year end, so it was really hot around here at that time, and we'd have to go into this warehouse that was just a tin metal building and count stoves and refrigerators and all that kind of stuff. The counting was easy because they were big objects. It wasn't like your cornflakes, but they were big objects, but it would be 100 degrees in those buildings, and it was not a fun job to do. Now, the fun job in the firm that I was at that point in time was we all wanted to get assigned to the Hilton Head job, because we had a client in Hilton Head on Hilton Head Island in South Carolina, and we all wanted to go down to that. Well, I can tell you, I got assigned to that job, and I ended up being on that job for 7 weeks. I was ready to come back and count those stoves and refrigerators in that hot warehouse after I'd been gone for 7 weeks to Hilton Head and not really being able to get out and see Hilton Head.
Wow. Okay. Well, it seems like we had some interesting interesting starts to our careers. But let's think about now. What do you think's changed in the accounting profession over those years? What are the key things that are different?
Well, the one big key thing that anybody would say would be technology. It's totally changed since I started, because I started with 13 column pads and 5 column pads, and we wrote everything with a pencil or a pen. And I haven't used a pencil in a long time because I type everything. But that's been a huge difference. And the one thing that hasn't changed, and I've said this when I speak to accounting groups, accounting is really a people business. It's not a numbers business. The numbers, I've got machines that will figure the numbers, but you've got to relate to people. If you can relate to people, they'll come to you for their accounting needs. Because, like I said, I can hire folks. I've got calculators. I've got computers. The numbers are the easy part. The hard part is understanding people and dealing with people's issues. And I don't think that has changed at all in the profession.
So, from the technology aspect, do you see that technology is going to continue to feature in making the accounting profession different?
Oh, I think it's definitely going to, and I think in the next 5 years we're going to see a huge difference in the auditing world with the fact of big data. I know the large firms are really heavy into that, and I'm seeing it even in our firm. We've got to audit through the computer instead of around the computer the way we've been doing for years. The auditing techniques we need today are not the same ones we needed 15, 20 years ago because of the computerization and big data. And I think we're going to see more continuous auditing, and I think that is going to be a huge change in the profession, is the use of data and data analytics, that we're just starting to scratch the surface, but I think it's going to move very quickly. And within the next 5 years, I think that we're going to probably see accounting standards that's going to require us to use data analytics. I mean, it's going to be written into the standards. Now, that's my opinion, but that's what I see coming up.
Well, I see one of the big four, KPMG, is working with IBM to apply IBM's Watson and big data computing technology to their audit services. The goal is to automate the labor-intensive aspects, menial tasks, tallying the client's inventory, etc., and all that extra processing power is going to allow auditors to review nearly all of the client's transactions instead of just a portion, as most auditing firms obviously do currently. Is this kind of the next big step in audits, do you think? And if so, what about the smaller or the medium-sized firms who maybe can't, enlist the help of Watson?
Well, they probably can't enlist the help of Watson, but there's still a lot of data analytic tools that they can use. I mean, we use a software here called IDEA. Of course, it's not Watson. It's not IBM Watson. Let's get real. But I know that one of the other big four firms, and I can't remember which one, just bought a data analytics firm out of New Zealand. I just read that the other day. And that tells me where this is headed. And small firms are going to have to get on going to have to do it too, because standards, when they're written, they're not written for any one size firm. They're written to cover what needs to be covered and happen in the auditing world. And with data analytics, as you mentioned, we're going to be able to audit 100% of transactions versus just taking small samples of huge bodies of transactions. I think the skill set for the auditor is going to change drastically, because they're going to have to be able to look at that data, that analytics that we get, and look at the anomalies and be able to drill down into the anomalies to see where the issues are. And so it's going to take a different skill set than what we currently need in our firm.
Yeah, actually, there's been a cyclical element to this, because I remember when I first started, the sample sizes were quite large. And then we moved away from that, and we went very balance sheet auditing wise. And now it seems like we can move back to transactional auditing with the new technologies.
I think you're 100% correct with regard to that. And realistically, auditing the balance sheet, as we have found out, and the standards have changed over that, most of the issues are going to be flowing through the income statement. They're not flowing through the balance sheet.
Yes.
Because if you've got a defalcation, where's it going to end up? Where's it going to flow through? It's going to flow through the income statement as an expense somewhere or as a reduction in income. So the concentrating on the balance sheet, I think, and I've been around the profession a long time, and I know exactly what you're talking about there, but we've gotten away from that balance sheet concentration more toward the income statement because that's where the issues really are.
Right. So tell me, nowadays, where do you spend most of your time in the firm? Is it client oriented? Is it building the firm? Where do you spend most of your time?
Most of it is spent probably building the firm and then client relationships. Those two areas would be where I spend the majority of my time. And building the firm includes with me traveling quite a bit, actually sitting on the peer review board, which I do roll off the board in October. It's my second go-round on the peer review board. But it's spent making those relationships and driving the firm forward so that I can see what's going on in the profession so that our firm can stay out on the front end and not just be playing catch-up all the time.
Yeah.
That has become my role.
As your firm grows, 10 partners, 50 plus staff, what we call the client service framework has to be maintained and constantly developed so that everybody in the firm is behaving in the same way. Is that a challenge, do you think, as you grow larger?
It's a challenge even when you're smaller, but in all honesty, we have worked really hard on our processes. We've been having annual strategic planning with an outside consultant. We use Boomer Consulting with regard to that, and he comes in once a year, and we do strategic planning, and it's not just a partner group. We actually have some upper-level employees that attend that strategic planning meeting, and I think that helps keep us all on one page and keep us moving forward in the right direction, and so that we all have a direction and it's not just a hodgepodge, or we avoid also those silos that tend to happen in a lot of CPA firms. Everybody just taking care of their stuff, and it's not a firm-oriented approach. And we've got very much a one-firm-oriented approach, and I think our strategic planning helps drive that.
Yeah. I think also you're a little unusual in that you're bringing outside thinkers to help you with certain things that you're not experts in. Who else have you brought in?
We use Alan Colton when we do mergers. We use Gail Crosley with regard to business development. And then I mentioned the Gary Boomer and his group, the Boomer Consulting folks. Been using them since 2008, and that's probably one of the first outside consultants that we use. But I think CPAs make a huge mistake in thinking they can be everything to themselves and to everyone. And they don't a lot of times seek that outside help from the folks that are very niche, and that's what they do. They help firms manage. And just like we want to help our clients manage,
What about Ron Baker? Have you worked with him? We recently had him on a call.
I'll take that back. We haven't done a lot of work with Ron, but we have had Ron come in and spend a day with us. And actually, it's one of the things that's on our initiatives. It's probably 2 or 3 years down the road, but we would like to start working toward more of a value pricing model, and gradually maybe work toward doing away with the timesheet. It will take us a while to get there, but I do like Ron's thoughts and processes with regard to that.
Yeah, well, Ron is completely in line with Hayden Rock's philosophy. In fact, we had him on the Accounting Success podcast last week. So it seems like we're all singing from the same song sheet here, Alan, which is kind of encouraging because I think that it needs groups of people to move the industry and the profession forward.
Oh, I agree that we've got to have groups of people to do that. And sometimes it's the people that the profession looks at and says, well, that'll never work. But then 2 or 3 years down the road, they start pulling into that. And I think a lot of that is, as accountants, we do a lot of we use the Colby test here, the KOLBE test, and most accountants all have the same profile from the aspect that they got to have a lot of information in order to make decisions. And so it sometimes slows partner groups down because they all have that same profile. They get analysis paralysis sometimes because they just need one more bit of information before they can pull the trigger and make the decision. Luckily, I've got a totally opposite profile, imagine that, than what you'll see in a lot of accountants, because I'm one of these folks that I don't have to have that. I fly at the 100,000-foot level, and I make decisions usually fairly quickly. I do want information, but it don't have to be the granular information that a lot of folks need. in order to
Yeah.
make that decision.
Do you find that as you try to make changes in your own firm, that you need champions amongst your partners and your staff also to help make those changes go quickly and go in a collectively the same way?
If you don't have those champions, you won't make the change. Now that's
I think
that's what it boils down to.
No, I completely agree. And again, our experience is to find that, which of course, as you scale up, that becomes even more important, because even if you're a very strong leader and you're leading the business, Alan, it's very difficult to get that message across when you have 100 folks or you have 200 folks. It becomes even more important. So as your firm grows, what would you say the compliance versus advisory proportions are now? Are you doing more advisory work? Do you feel that that's the growing area rather than compliance?
I think that is going to be the largest growing area that we have. We're already starting to see it because we have had a champion now that is moving what we call client accounting services along, and that's got an advisory piece to it. We're still in very much in infancy in this firm, but it's also our largest growing segment in our business. I mean, our auditing is still growing and our tax services are growing, but our fastest growing service is moving into client accounting services in a more of an advisory role to small businesses.
Now, does that also mean that clients you're attracting clients who you might not have attracted in the past because they're looking for, if you will, an advisory partner rather than just a CPA?
Yes, I definitely can see that. I mean, one of the last clients that we just picked up, and it's actually one of the larger clients that we have in that service. I mean, just had our quarterly meeting with them the other day, the partner did, and she came out of the meeting and told me that she had already sold them some more additional services from an HR perspective because they needed that, and that wasn't in the scope of services that we had set up with them to start with. But they wanted the additional services, and that's where we're seeing the advisory services growing, is because you're meeting with those clients and you're finding out what their needs are, and then you're able to take care of that need for that client, and then they're very happy.
So perhaps you might be able to tell us a little bit about some of the other advisory services that you now offer.
Well, one of the advisory services, believe it or not, that we offer is to other CPA firms, because we do a lot of peer review work, but stuff that we call peer review is not necessarily peer review, but we're actually, one of my partners is currently doing, and I consider this advisory services, he's actually sort of like the audit partner for 2 other firms, because he reviews a tremendous amount of the audit work they do, because they felt like they're smaller, they didn't have the expertise in-house. So they've come to us for that expertise and for that advisory role in their auditing practice. We do a lot of the litigation support. We do a lot of business valuation, which is, again, advisory services. We're actually starting to pick up even more forensic and fraud type work. That is really starting to move forward. We've been developing that for a long period of time, but it takes a while to get a name and some recognition there. But we just picked up another client on that the other day that was really an unusual situation that I want to tell you about, because my partner was at a meeting and met an attorney, and the attorney said, this board that I'm on, we just hired you guys last night to do some work for us. And my partner said, well, I've been out of town, I hadn't heard anything about it, whatever. He calls me on the phone, I check around, nobody knows anything about it. We go to the newspaper, because it was a public type entity, and sure enough, they had said, we're going to hire Baldwin CPAs to do this forensic work for us, and they had never had any contact with us. We come to find out that through a department in the state that we'd done another job for had recommended that they get us to do this job. So that tells me we're starting to get some momentum in that area that we haven't had in the past. So.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that you bring on full-time employees to do these services, perhaps like the forensic accounting, or do you seek independent professionals whose expertise is understood and that you can bring in on a need basis?
Well, right now we've actually got 2 partners that are working very hard in that area, and we've actually got we've got a senior that's actually had some training in that area, and right now we've been able to handle all that with those folks. Now there has been a couple of engagements that we could not do, and so we have reached out to our alliance partner. We're a BDO Alliance firm, and we reached out to BDO in order to bring that expertise in, and when we didn't have the expertise with regard to it. So we try and have that network out there where we can take care of folks, even if it's an area that we're not, I won't say as trained as we need to be, but it's not our niche area. We have not network.
Okay.
Still and
maybe
make everybody happy.
I'm sorry, but one of the things that kind of brings a thought to mind is clearly you have some very in-depth expertise in certain areas. What do you feel maybe that your firm does particularly well?
That's a good question. I think we do an excellent job with contractors. I mean, we're known in the bonding circles. You know, those folks, the underwriters, like the information that we provide, and that we help these. You know, they feel very comfortable with the information that we do for these contractors. I think we're very good in that area. We've got a very strong not-for-profit niche. I mean, we're very well known now with the last merger we did with regard to not-for-profits. I have a partner in the Louisville office that is just, she lives, eats, and breathes not-for-profits and does an excellent job there, and we're known for that. And we're getting known more so for this litigation support area also. I mean, that's something that we're doing extremely well and is moving forward. We've got, because we have so many partners and I've got some champions in those areas, you know, the client accounting services, that is really, like I said, starting to take off and do much, much better. And we're working with some outside help consultants with regard to that has helped move it along even faster and help us with the technology.
Mm.
Those are our strong areas. That's what I consider our really strong areas. And then peer review is sort of a peripheral strong area for us and to help other accounting firms.
Right. Is there an area that you kind of feel that you wish you did better?
We don't have a real high-end tax practice this time. We're still developing that. We do have more high net worth individuals, and we're starting to pick up more of that high-end tax practice. And actually, it's all being done pretty much at the partner level when we have those type of returns. I would like to see that area grow and us get a little bit better probably in that area than what we are. I mean, we've got the expertise. We can find the expertise, but I don't know as we have it under our roofs at this point.
Well,
yeah.
Instances. Yeah, I think actually that's an area where the exterior expertise can be very, very helpful, especially if you have, like we have on our team, guys who are being involved in family offices, and so we use their tax attorney expertise, which allows us to be true experts at the levels that you're talking about.
Well, that's what we're going to do right now, because I mean we're actually starting to get some movement in international tax, and we don't really have anybody in the firm to handle that, but we have been partnering here again through our BDO Alliance and through the Alliance firms and through BDO also. When we run into those situations and we're able to handle that instead of having to tell the client, well, we just can't help you at all. You know, we tell them that we're going to bring in this expert to do that. And that's working extremely well at this point in time. And the size firm we are, that's the way we'll have to continue to do that for a period of time.
Oh, I think it's also the best way to service the client because you can deliver true expertise. What would you say is your biggest challenge right now? You said you just gone through another expansion, a lot of things going on in the firm. Any challenge that comes to mind which you think is probably the thing that needs to be dealt with soonest and fastest?
Well, it's a challenge that we always have as we merge other firms in, because we're sort of known to be a firm that, you know, we are actually in the acquisition mode or merger mode. And as we bring other folks in, it's always a challenge to get them into what we call the Baldwin process or the Baldwin way, because part of the deal we always cut is you know, you're going to have to come into our processes because we're usually we've always been the acquirer or the larger firm, and getting folks sometimes to let go of what they're doing is always a challenge, because accountants, most of them do not like change, and we have to manage that change. And I think that's the big thing is, and not even in the mergers, but it's just managing the change that we have in tax law, the change we have in auditing, just the continual change that we have in this profession at this point in time. I can remember when I started in this profession, I think there were 19 FASBs. There's over 200, I think, at this point in time. I haven't kept up with them like it once did. And exponentially, they've just grown so much faster. And it's changing tax law. It's changing everything we do. It's changing technology because our technology changes as we go, too. I mean, we're talking about using data analytics and those kind of things. It's still changing. Everybody sort of wants to go back to what they did last year because it's easy and that's what they feel comfortable with. And I just think as a profession, managing change is one of the hardest things, not only for my firm, but just for any firm out there in this profession at this point in time, because change is growing so exponentially fast.
Right. And when you think about your clients, your business owner clients particularly, what sort of mistakes do you see them making in their tax planning or their business planning? What are the things that you find keep coming to the surface that you need to address with them?
They wait until after they've done the deal to come see me.
Yeah.
I don't care how much I preach to them, and they'll let me know, well, I'm thinking about selling my business, or I'm thinking about doing this. Well, we need to have a meeting. Let's get a time. Well, I'm not going to do it right now. Well, then the next time I hear from them, oh, by the way, I sold my business. I mean, I just recently had this happen. I said, you sold your business? You've already got your Oh, yeah, we're already moving out.
Yeah.
The other new owners take over tomorrow. I'm like, okay. Well, they're stuck with the deal they've got. I can't do anything to help them structure that deal any better. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges I think we all face is getting clients to call us before they do something instead of after they do something, because it's too hard to correct after that point in time. And a lot of times there's nothing you can do to change it.
Yeah, I think that you alluded to something before when you said you have quarterly meetings with certain clients. The idea of a monthly or quarterly meeting where you're almost an integral part of their business is one of those ways which you can possibly prevent that going forward. But I think, have you found challenges with actually having clients be prepared to have those monthly or quarterly meetings?
Well, actually, we just haven't been able to start getting that implemented as well as we, with some new clients that we brought on. They're bringing on in the advisory service role. And what we've done on that is we schedule the next quarterly meeting when we leave this one. That goes back to something we learned as we do estate planning. We're not doing the amount of estate planning we once did now that we've got the exemptions that we have. But at one time when I used to do a lot of estate planning, and the one thing we always made sure of when we left an estate planning meeting was we've got on the calendar for the next meeting. Because if we said we were going to get back together in 3 weeks and we didn't put a date on the calendar, that 3 weeks a lot of times grew to 3 months or 6 months.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing with these clients that we're getting set up on these regular meetings. Before we leave that meeting, we're setting the time for the next meeting so it doesn't get skipped.
And what kind of help and advice are business owners looking for from CPAs or from your firm today? I mean, maybe how's that different from 5 or 10 years ago?
Well, HR is becoming a bigger area for even a lot of small business clients because a lot of those folks do not have HR on staff. They're not large enough to have a HR person. And that's an area that we're seeing a whole lot more questions in than we did in the past. And part of that's because of the new DOL rules that we just got out this year. But they're also dealing with looking at drafting business manuals, employee manuals, those kind of things that they hadn't had in the past. These are services that I think a lot of times that we didn't realize folks may want, but after you sit down and start having meetings with them and talking to them, this is something that's on their mind greatly, because the employee issue has just become, doesn't matter whether you're in public accounting or you're running the cab company or you're a contractor, finding good, qualified, skilled employees that are dependable is a tough thing, and then how do you keep those people?
Right.
So that's one area that we're seeing a lot of questions and a lot more movement in than we had in the past.
Yeah, I think people, small businesses, high staff turnover is a problem. Employee retention can actually be a huge cost saving if they can find ways to get that done. And as you say, they don't necessarily have the skills or an HR department to deal with that for them and help them with develop that. Now, there are a lot of changes going on across the accounting industry, Alan, and many people are really quite nervous about those. Ourselves at Hayden Rock, we like to look at every change as an opportunity. So, as you look forward with your firm and the industry as a whole, where do you see the opportunities?
Well, this regulatory environment that we live in today, we as accounting firms need to take advantage of that because there's opportunities every time we get a regulatory change, from the DOL from any government agency, even standards changes within our profession. Those are opportunities for firms. They're opportunities that some of us don't like, but my saying always goes, if you give me lemons, I'm just going to have to try and figure out a way to make lemonade out of it. And I think that's what we need to do as a profession. Some of this stuff we can't control. But when it's handed down to us and we need to help our clients, we need to figure out the best way to do that and explain to our clients and have those conversations with them and say, you need my help, and here's why. And I think that sometimes as CPAs, because of the personality types that we are, we look at, oh man, that's just more work I'm going to have to do, and we don't realize that the client is willing for us to do that work, and they're willing to pay us for it. And I think a lot of times, especially in smaller firms, they don't look at it that way. Now,
yeah. So, unfortunately, Alan, our time's just about up. Now, is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to share with us?
No, I just love the profession that we're in, and I tell folks, I go and speak to college graduates all the time, and I tell them, find something that you love to do so that when you get up in the morning, you don't feel like it's a job. And I've never really felt like that what I do is a job. I do love my profession. I want to be respected by folks in my profession. And I think CPAs need to sometimes get outside their box and their comfort zone and understand that we need to embrace change as a profession and thrive with that change and not hold back and fight change, because we're in a fast-moving world anymore, and things that used to take years to change now sometimes change in 6 months to a year. And we just have to deal with that in our profession. And that would be my advice to anybody that's in the CPA profession is embrace change. Look to the younger folks in the world, because they've lived with change much more so than older guys like me have, because they grew up in a changing world with the electronics and the technology and those kind of things, where I've been brought into that world. Not that I don't love technology, but because I do. But they've had that change, that constant change going on in their life pretty much ever since that they've been in the world. And change is here to stay, and we just need to embrace that as a profession.
I think those are great words of wisdom, Alan. Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Alan Long, Managing Partner of Baldwin CPAs, for being so generous with his time today. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you for asking me.
Alan, if people want to learn more about you or your firm, what's the best way to reach you?
You can reach me by email. It's alan.long@baldwincpas.com. Or you can go to our website, which is baldwincpas.com, if you forget that email address, and you can fill out a form and send me an email from there. Or you can call my direct dial number. I don't have a problem with that. It's 859-626-4950.
That's great. Could you just repeat that email address again, please, Alan?
Sure. It's alan.long@baldwincpas.com.
That's great. Okay, there you have it. This is Ian Wellham saying goodbye for now. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the Accounting Success Podcast.
Thanks, Ian.